Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing TOuchlighter in a 15+2 game on leechess.org. Let's play e4 in this game. So I searched for an opponent with a 2200 rating or higher. So he's playing the Nimzovich variation, knight c6 on move 1. So I think knight f3 is just the simplest response to this because, in my opinion, black's best move is to play e5, and we're going to transpose into e4, e5 waters. But no, all right, he wants a Scandi-like position. So black has committed to an early knight c6 here. I can try to derive some benefit from this. I'm just going to play knight c3 to start. And I'm guessing he's going to put the queen on a5 because that's what they usually do. No, queen h5. Okay, so I get to fight against my own system here. First question I have for black in this position, though, is what happens if knight b5? Because wouldn't that compel black to play king d8 to protect the pawn? I don't see how else black is going to protect it. There's no check on e5 I have to worry about because the knight covers. So knight b5 already poses black a difficult question. And I think I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to calculate it too much. I got to be more judicious with my time expenditure in these 15-minute games. Yeah, and black instantly plays king d8 as expected. Probably just d4 here. I guess black is looking to play bishop g4 next. I am a little bit worried about putting my bishop on e2. I don't want my bishop to become overloaded trying to defend both f3 and also b5. So that's one thing I'm thinking about right now. I mean, I could withdraw the knight, but that seems premature. Maybe not so bad, though. It has done its job on b5. I don't think I'm gaining much from leaving it out there. I mean, I'd like to play a quick d4, bishop f4. So let's say d4, bishop g4, bishop f4. Yeah, black would have to play rook c8 most likely against that. Sort of feels like I'm worrying about minor issues. Yeah, I think quick development is in order. So let's play d4. I know I'm allowing bishop g4, but I gotta believe that black has already played somewhat egregiously here. So let's not get caught up with, worrying about unimportant things. So let's just play this move. So I'm not going to play bishop e2 because I don't want on bishop takes f3 to be unable to take with my bishop due to hanging the knight. So I'm just trying to develop actively. Black could play bishop takes f3 right now because if bishop takes c7 check, king d7, I will have issues defending the bishop on c7. Black can continue with a6 after I recapture on f3. So if bishop takes f3, I'll just take back with my pawn. I don't want to trade queens because black's king is going to be in the center for the foreseeable future. So if your opponent's king is in danger, you should not try to trade queens, generally. You probably have the initiative, and you don't want to increase their margin of safety by swapping queens. Okay, so rook c8. I can keep pushing with d5 if I like. That seems to be the most straightforward move. d5, if knight e5. I would just have bishop e2, but I'm kind of wondering if bishop takes e5 is also decent. That d5 looks good. Yeah, let's do it. Strike while the iron is hot. I think if knight here, I was just going to play bishop c4, develop and defend the d5 pawn. So black takes on f3. So following my own advice, I should probably not play queen takes f3. Just wondering for a second if I can sack my queen, but I don't think that's going to work. Take on d1, rook takes, king d8. I don't see a crush after that. Although it's kind of cool looking. I'm halfway tempted to calculate it. Take c6, take d1, rook takes d1, check. If necessary, black could always play queen takes d1 even, so it's probably not so good. Even with the queen trade, I would be a lot better here, but I feel like keeping the queens on board is the best policy. So yeah, let's take back this way. Surprised by how black is playing so far. He's got a decent rating, but this variation looks highly dubious. So now the pawn on f3 is attacked. Probably just bishop e2. Yeah. Let's just play that. a7 is hanging. So I can always go think about taking this pawn. I would like to castle queenside soon, though, if I could. So I think instead of going after the a-pawn, I'm going to prioritize development. Depends how black plays, though, because if he plays some sort of developing move himself, so let's say knight f6, maybe I should go after the a-pawn. Queen d4 would be a nice move, but knight takes f3 comes with check, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, hitting my rook and stopping me from castling. I wouldn't mind giving up the f-pawn if I could in order to get my king to the queen side and just accelerate my development, but I don't see how I'm going to do that. I may have to play a move like bishop g3 first in order to threaten f4, advancing the pawn, trying to get in the discovered attack against the queen on h5. And he does play knight f6. Yeah, I'm liking the look of bishop back to g3 here. Keeping some pressure on e5 in the process. Could snag the pawn, like I was saying, but I don't think it's necessary yet. So bishop g3. Hope everyone has had a good weekend. It's about 6 o'clock p.m. U.S. Central Time. Just winding down my evening with a game of chess. By the way, I do think Lee Chess ratings are inflated. I've had some questions about that. People wondering how Lee Chess ratings compare to other sites like chess.com or even to over-the-board ratings. And it'd be interesting to know exactly how much Lee Chess ratings are inflated, but I believe they are in every rating category. So queen f5, averting the f4 threat. I can still play f4 if I want, but let's give it a little think here. Knight d4 also comes to mind. Knight takes a7, attacking the rook on c8. Knight d4, though, how does black deal with the threat on the knight? He needs to move his queen somewhere where the knight will remain defended. And that's not easy, right? Knight d4, queen back to d7, I just take. If knight d4, queen g5, I have f4 with the fork. So knight d4 would compel the queen back to h5, and I can play this, it seems. That can't possibly be good for black. Yeah, I think this is going to be terminal for black. Just not a good move available in response to this. This seems practically forced. And then f4, he can play knight eg4. So bring the knight back to block the attack on the queen, but I think just h3 after that is going to guarantee that I'll win a piece. Ooh, although maybe not. Maybe queen takes d5 then. I guess I have bishop f3 in that case. Okay. So let's not get too excited yet. There are a few things to calculate. So f4, knight eg4, h3, queen takes d5, bishop f3. That does look winning, though. By taking that pawn on d5, black also exposes their king further along the d-file, so discoveries with the knight. I don't think black's going to survive that. Yeah. And he plays that. I was also briefly considering some knight jump like this with a discovery, but with black's knight guarding d7, it's not working. It's also unnecessary. So this is a critical moment in the game because I feel like I'm on the verge of a forced win, so I'm just taking a little time to check my work. It's like a mathematical proof. Even if you're certain you have the answer, you got to check your work and make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So h3, queen takes d5, bishop f3 is my main continuation. And I think the queen is going to be forced somewhere unfavorable. He does have queen a5 check. But after c3, the problems persist for black. The knight's hanging. I'm threatening discoveries. I think that's just over. And I want to exploit this pin before black has a chance to get out of it. So, yep. I don't see what black is doing against this. I'm not afraid of a knight move, because black's queen will be hanging, and if the knight comes to e3 or f2, I can just take. So bishop f3. Now just c3, I think, is fine. And you can see that king, back when he had to play knight in response to knight b5, king d8, that's coming back to haunt black, because now knight c6 is a big threat, among other things. Seems to me that queen h5 was just a bad move in the opening. Black might be on the verge of losing after that. Okay, so king there. So here, not only can I take on g4, but there's also this possibility of taking on b7, which looks enticing because maybe I can swipe that pawn and then pull my bishop to c6. Black still has trouble, right? Because g4 will remain hanging, and also I'm getting the attack on the rook. The position is so good, I'm half tempted just to take, but bishop takes b7 seems even stronger with almost no risk. There's not too many ways black can confuse the issue here. Yeah, let's take that. That's just one of those moves you have to double check too, because I am passing up an easy win of a piece, and my bishop is undefended here, but the position is so overwhelmingly winning already, I can afford to do this, and it'll probably bring about the result faster. Yeah, and there you go, black resigns. So as I was saying, I think queen h5 just lands black in hot water. Queen h5 on this move, that is. I know there is some theory after queen a5. I'm not a big fan of this line myself for black, putting the knight on c6. It's a sharper version of the normal queen a5 Scandinavian. Black could also consider queen back to d8 here, but that's also not really in the spirit of the queen d8 variation. I'm pretty happy with how I played it otherwise. Yeah, I think the straightforward development of the bishop to f4 is good, hitting the pawn on c7. I think d5 is good. Black took very quickly here. Maybe black can benefit from avoiding this exchange, at least for the moment. Like I was thinking knight b4 or even knight e5 might be played. Probably the decisive mistake is, I would guess, this move, queen f5. I mean, I hesitate to even say guess because it's clear cut, so I should be more certain than that. Queen f5 is the losing move. After knight d4, black is just forced to go back, and f4 and everything starts coming in white's favor. So if not knight f6, what else can black do here? Maybe a6? Try to back my knight off. That also solves the problem of knight takes a7, but the position is not inspiring for black either way. Let's say a6 and knight back to d4. That further protects f3, so maybe I could get on with my plan of queen d2 and castling queenside. Secure my king. Black's coordination is, really nothing to speak of. So winning position for white even here, I think. I don't hesitate to say that because black's damage they've done to their position, especially with their king, has already been done. Yeah, not really much more else to say. Let's go click over to the analysis board. Quick game. So I had 0 inaccuracies, 0 mistakes, 0 blunders for 18 average centipawn loss. Always nice to get those triple zeros. Although you can't strictly go by this when you're trying to judge the caliber of your play. It really depends on how complex the game is, how much stock you put into these numbers. It's just a baseline view of how accurately you played according to the computer. And my opponent had 0 inaccuracies, 3 mistakes, and 1 blunder for a 66 average centipawn loss. So just going back, as I said, against knight c6 on move 1, for you e4 players out there, I do think it makes sense just to play knight f3 here. You can also play d4, but this tends to lead to positions that black may be more comfortable with because most likely a lot of their opponents do play d4, so they get this move all the time. Black can play e5 here, and unless you play the Scotch, which can be reached after knight f3, you might be out of book. And d5, knight e7 is not necessarily good for white, despite the outward space advantage. So I think knight f3 is just a simple move, and black should probably play e5, and we're going to have a double king pawn position. The late Grandmaster Tony Miles was a big proponent of knight c6. He often played this move. But yeah, knight f3 would be my recommendation to most of you. So black plays d5 instead. I take, queen takes, knight c3. I was a little tempted to try to play either d4 or maybe even the immediate c4, just looking to gain some space. If you can ever establish a structure with pawns on d4, c4, and then the knight in behind it on c3, that's usually even better than the structure with the knight on c3 blocking the c pawn. But I knew knight c3 to be the main move here, so I didn't want to go into that. Also, d4, bishop g4 leads to some heavy theory. c4 I'm not so sure about, though. c4 might be possible here. Because in the analogous position, after e4, d5 takes, queen takes, and now c4, I analyzed this position in my repertoire on Chessable on the Scandinavian. This move, while well-intentioned for white trying to play d4, is not accurate because of queen e4 check. And however white blocks the check, there's some sort of concession. Bishop e2 will lose the g2 pawn. Knight e2 will lose the c4 pawn. And queen e2 allows kind of a lame exchange of queens, and black should have no trouble in something like this, or even e5, and just play to control the d4 square. In a recent video, it was one of my Blitzsmith videos, I mentioned how when there's two equivalent-looking continuations that you happen upon in a game, compared to some other line you calculated or even some variation you've seen before, it's good to try to find the difference between them. You don't just want to be like, this looks familiar. You want to say, this looks familiar, and I'd like to know the difference between the two, because that might impact the play. So that's why I'm wondering, as played in the game, whether in this position c4 makes more sense than in the line I just showed you where the knights are not on f3 and c6 yet. Because here, queen e4 can just be met by bishop e2. And I think white stands a pretty good chance of being able to play d4 successfully. Knight c3 is also coming with tempo on the queen. So I would venture to say this is better than that other position I was showing you. Let me just click on the engine and see what Stockfish has to say. Yeah, Stockfish already giving a comfortable edge to white, half a pawn roughly. So c4 might be a candidate move here. So I just played knight c3 instead. And black probably should play queen a5. And after this, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to play. I have seen some games in this line, but I'm by no means an expert. Usually white combines d4 and bishop b5. I do know that. Bishop b5 is a move that makes a great deal of sense here because we're attacking the knight and threatening to double isolate the pawns. So that is one drawback of having committed the knight to c6 already. So that's likely the move I would have chosen. But d4, also acceptable. Black's play in this line is predicated on a quick queenside castling. So let's say d4 is played. I know black often plays bishop g4, and if white just kind of plays normally in response to this, let's say bishop e2, castle here. This resembles some of the knight f3 variations of the Scandinavian, but you can see that black is already generating much more pressure than normal in a Scandinavian, a mainline Scandinavian. So white has to be concerned about the safety of the d pawn. And the knight on c3 might hamper white's ability to defend it. Like I can't put my pawn there, for instance. There's ways that black can attack involving pawn to e5 too, trying to exploit that pin on the d file. So just be heads up about this if you get into this line. I wonder what the main move is. I'm just going to have a quick look at the Lee Chess Opening Explorer just to see what the main move is after queen a5. Make sure which database we got. Oh, it's up here, this little gear. Let's go to the Masters database. So lots of games here, and you can see that bishop b5 is leading the pack with a healthy winning percentage for white. Yeah, so that's probably the best move. Bishop b5, black usually responds with bishop d7 for the reason I mentioned. Black doesn't want to compromise their structure. But this is a significant downgrade compared to the bishop being on g4 and black having castled. So white usually castles short here. Let's say that black castles long just for illustrative purposes. Yeah, I think now white can play d4 with much more clarity because there's not as much to worry about the immediate attack on d4. And the computer already really likes white here. Okay. Always good to take a peek at the opening theory. So after queen h5, the evaluation does go up. How do I get rid of this thing? Click there. Okay, there we go. So queen h5, and I played knight b5. This is just the move that must highlight the drawback of queen h5. He can't easily defend the c-pawn. I wouldn't play knight b5 if he had gone queen a5 because he would already be defending that. But yeah, black just can't get in a decent position to defend this without using his king. He has to play king d8 or king d7, but king d7 is clearly bad. So king d8, I just went ahead and played d4, and then bishop g4. Yeah. So bishop g4, and then bishop f4, attacking the pawn on c7. See, the engine slightly prefers d5 here. d5, knight e5, bishop e2. Both moves look good, though. This comes with the immediate attack on c7. And after rook c8, the evaluation climbs even further in white's favor. So the best move here is a6. That is interesting. So that points to the fact that if I take the pawn, I may not get my minor pieces back from the abyss here into black's position. Like if I take with the knight, rook c8, and this knight has no good escape. Note that d5 is covered by the queen. So black may be in a position where they can take the knight on c7 and force me to give up 2 minor pieces for the rook. Yeah, that doesn't look as clear. I mean, I guess I always have d5 to try to complicate things, but yeah, I don't like the look of this. A6 is not a move I saw or appreciated. Definitely not in this position. And if bishop takes c7, I think just king up. And I did mention this issue in the game that I don't want to be able to take with the bishop, but have to worry about my knight defending that bishop after king d7. Even here, this is somehow good for white, though. d5 with the counterattack. What happens if take here? Now bishop back to g3. And then I suppose if knight b4, I'm going to get bishop takes b5 check in, and black's going to be suffering still. It does always boil down to black's king safety, because their king is ridiculous out on d7. But the fact that black has to resort to a move like a6, or find that move, maybe more accurately, already demonstrates that his position is pretty bad. So rook c8, I go ahead and play d5. And he takes on f3. So I mentioned knight b4, knight e5 as being other possibilities. Maybe knight b4 is not concerning, though. Yeah, I probably don't even have to defend this pawn further. Queen d2 is a good move, isn't it? Because if knight takes d5, I can always play c4 and pin. So I don't see that working out in black's favor. It's just a little messy. Like, there are certain things like this, and my rook and my bishop are both under attack. But yeah, I take here with check, don't I? And white just wins a piece. Black's position is far too shaky. And what if knight e5? Take, bishop takes, and now this move, queen d4. That's nifty. That's a cool move. So defending the bishop on e5, and we're still threatening the light square bishop. And if the bishop comes back here, probably now is a good time to take on a7. White has snagged a pawn. Black's king side is slumbering. Black has the persistent king issue. Yeah, this looks... It's already +5 according to the computer. So we're in forced win territory. Queen c3 next, going after the c7 pawn. Yeah, black takes here. They're going to probably get mated in a couple moves. So back to the game. D5, bishop takes F3. And again, I want to keep the queens on if I can, because I'm the one attacking. I don't want to allow black to trade queens and thereby make his king safer. So G takes F3. Interesting that the computer does like queen takes F3, though. I did briefly mention that in the game, that my position is so good that probably I could trade queens and still be significantly better. Knight B4, castle queenside. Yeah, white's fully coordinated. Bishop H3 is now a threat, trying to drive the rook away from guarding C7. A7 is still loose. But it felt like G takes F3 was the way to go. So that's what I played. Knight E5, bishop E2. Now knight F6. So understandably, black tries to develop. If A6, I was mentioning just knight D4, which looks pretty good. Yeah. Helping to defend F3. And let's say if here, I could play bishop G3 like in the game, but I think also I could do this. And just get ready to castle queenside. I don't think I have to be too worried about something like that. Again, if ever black takes that pawn, I feel like they're going to come to grief down the D file. Take, C4. And if the knight moves, we've got knight C6, double check, winning the queen. So knight F6, and I drop the bishop back. Computer likes knight takes A7, but this move felt comfortable to me. The bishop is not very well placed on F4 because it does block the F pawn. But I do want to keep it attacking the knight, but now we threaten this. Yep, and queen F5, mistake according to the computer, in admittedly already very bad position. So he had to play a knight retreat, knight E7, to try to take the sting out of F4. And then take here, rook A8, knight back to B5, attacking C7 again. Yeah. Should be winning for white as well. And now we just get in knight D4, and black can't navigate these tactics successfully. H3, queen takes, bishop F3. Everything is done with tempo here, so black never has a moment to recover. Yeah, and the double check, or the discovery really, picking up the queen on A5 and also the attack on G4 is too much. And bishop takes B7. I already explained the reasoning for that. Okay, so yeah, collapse in the opening for black, but I think this demonstrates some key ideas in this variation. How you want to respond to knight C6 on move 1, and how you can potentially deal with these more active versions of the Scandinavian with the knight already committed to C6 if black tries to transpose into that. Or even if you get it from the normal move order, you could also reach this via E4, D5, take, and if, let's say you play knight C3, queen A5, and then either D4 or knight F3, black could play knight C6 there. Likewise, another transposition is if you like knight F3 here, knight C6 also possible with a transposition. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be back again soon with another one. Bye, guys.